Guys, I've done it. Oh yes, I've made it happen with my teleport bomb! Hello then, my fellow sorcerers, and welcome to my magnum opus, my masterpiece of Season 4, the best sorcerer build that at least I have created, because, well, it is my sorcerer build. Unlike others where it's me giving you my min-maxed push to the extreme version of something established like Blizzard or Ball Lightning or Fob, this is its own new archetype, and I have shared with you it once before in its prototype stage. But I couldn't leave it there. I had to perfect it, and I would be remiss, as much as I think it's a really bad place for the class to be in design-wise, to not at least do something with Infinite Flame Shield this season. And of course, how could I apply it to anything else other than my baby? Yes, this is teleport, stomp, bomb, explosion, nuke, never stop, only move via teleporting, and it is glorious. I cannot overstate the level of fun this is to play. In all parts of the game, too. Nothing quite beats just hurtling along at warp speed, knowing that every time you teleport, everything will get one shot blown up, and you can be on your merry way. Especially now we have pets, we don't even need to go collect things like cinders if you're doing this through Helltide, which is just an excellent time. Oh my god, it is so brilliant. It farms torment bosses absolutely speedily, and now, as you're seeing, can pit push. I've comfortably taken it to 102, which I think is really quite good for, let's be honest, something that isn't exactly meta that I have created, and I am really proud of that, and it can still go further. I of course don't have perfect gear that's perfectly 12 out of 12 masterworked with the perfect hits on the 4, 8 and 12, and if I did, yeah, this could comfortably beat about 110, which is essentially as good as it gets for Sorcerer outside of, you know, the Immortal Flame Shield Firebolt Firewall build. So I am chuffed. I am certainly chuffed. The buff to teleport with its changed skill, a specific aspect that we will be employing, and a new couple synergies that I have worked in to really push it to its limit. Oh, the fact that there is still a higher ceiling to climb to makes me very happy. And of course, you do not need to Infinite Flame Shield this at all. You can just play it with normal gear and dominate, stomp, teleport, blitz through every bit of content you realistically want to do. The best part of this, outside of, yes, technically it can do 100 plus pits, is speed farming lower pits with it, because again, you just absolutely fly, because of course you do, you're only moving via a teleport that has a less than a 2-second cooldown by base, and then you're just resetting it constantly every time you auto-attack. It turns the evade teleport into something crazy. But the thing is, applying Infinite Flame Shield to it isn't just a defensive buff, which of course it is, but a huge offensive one. Because we now have Permanent Flame Shield, we now have Permanent Burn, which means we don't take a huge hit from having to have 2 enchantments that aren't Firebolt, which is a huge damage increase. So by making this immortal, I've actually raised the damage potential of it by a huge amount, which I think is a really nice double up. So, yeah, let's get into this then and share the perfected version of my teleport bomb that I have been dreaming of since Diablo 4 first launched, and I just, if this ends up being my final Season 4 build, which, depending on how things go, it might be, depends on changes, patches, if anything else is worked out. I'll always be theory crafting, but I always want to share a build that's actually worth sharing, and while I've been tinkering with ice shards and meteor, it's just... Ice Shards is just not good, and Meteor requires such a high level of gear that it's not practical. You might as well just be playing Firewall Firebolt at that point and do Pit 140. In any case, yeah, let's get into this. Once more with feeling then, here we are. Get all of your points all up in Arc Lash, so that's maxed out, take it to Enhanced, and then finally Glinting. Both of these help a lot with the cooldown reduction engine. Then over to Core, where we sort of ignore, and then move straight on to defensives. We want max 5 out of 5 flame shields, so we get as much duration on it as possible, and then we also want max teleport, so we get as low a cooldown on it as possible. Then we take it up to Enhanced, and then finally Mystical, which is a big part of our damage, about 30% of it. This 500% multiplicative is delicious, and the crackling energy really helps too. Then we want 3 out of 3 in Glass Cannon. We're literally immortal, so I mean, it's free damage, but even if we weren't, it's still free damage, as we are innately incredibly tanky with this build, given how often we're pressing a cooldown for protection. Then we want Ice Armor, taking it to Enhanced, and then finally Mystical. This extra 15% multiplicative to frozen enemies is actually huge for clearing the trash part of the pit, or just enemies in general that aren't bosses, because we will essentially permanently be freezing them, both through our dashes and having permanent ice armor up, because our cooldown reduction is that good. In any case, then, one in Elemental Attunement, just so it can happen, and happen it will, as we move on to Conjuration. We don't need any lucky hits, so that saves us some points there, and we want Ice Blades in to Enhanced, and then Summoned. Now we can complete our enchantment slots. We want Ice Blades in one, and of course the star of the show, Teleport in the other. This really is non-negotiable, which is why it's so nice to get permanent burning with permanent flame shield, so we can really have our cake and eat it too. We want Lightning Spear, take it to Enhanced, and then Invoked. One of the big gains of this version of the build is literally authentically permanent unstable currents, which means a permanent swarm of lightning spears, which means a permanent stunned room of enemies, which makes it all very, very nice for you, as every enemy is forever stunned, which does play into Glinting, which is just an extra little cherry on top. Get yourself aligned the elements, and then we put 3 out of 3 into Protection. Truly, we don't need this because of Permanent Flame Shield, but I don't want to just present the build as Permanent Flame Shield only. I want to present it as you can just use this because it will dominate everything, whether you care about getting perfect tempers, etc. or not. So that is there, and it also does give you a bit of a safety net. If you have nearly Permanent Flame Shield, only like a second or two downtime, it's still perfectly viable. Then 3 out of 3 in Conjuration Mastery. We'll have a lot of conjurations, so this is a lot of extra damage. Over to our Mastery, where we just want our Inner Flames into Devouring Blaze for that lovely extra crit multiplicative, and then over to our Ultimate side of things, where we can get Permafrost just to get 3 out of 3 Hoarfrost. This is for dealing with elites in the trash, as they will essentially always be chilled and frozen, and then this is just an extra 12% multiplicative on the cold side of things, and we do deal a lot of cold damage. Then we want to get Unstable Currents taken to Prime for the attack speed, and then lastly Coursing Currents, 3 out of 3 in Electrocution. Again, this is here for if you want to play this normally. If you are like me and have Permanent Flame Shield, yes, you technically can get rid of these 3 points here. Though, that said, we always want to leave at least 1 point in protection, so we do technically have a barrier for barrier synergy like Storm Swell, so never go less than 1, just offensively. But if you do have Permanent Flame Shield, you can respend these 5 points that I've taken out now wherever you want. However, if you don't, leave them in Electrocution and leave protection filled. Then for our key passive, we want Ess's Ferocity, so we can Ancient Flame for that sweet 50% attack speed. Alrighty then. Equipment then, and here is where I've made one of the big significant changes. let's start with gems real quick, because we don't need health, as we are going to be unkillable. We want to just pump intelligence into our armor, and that just equals lots more damage. It also lets us save on Paragon points, because we will get our capped resistances that much easier. So that's all well and good. Armor in your jewelry, and then vulnerable damage or critical hit damage in your weapons. So when it comes to aspect then, we want rapid for that sweet 30% faster swiping on our arc lash. Essentially, the faster we can attack with arc lash, the faster this build plays, and therefore the more damage it does, and the easier it is to be immortal. And honestly, that's one of the things that's really drawn me to building it into Teleport Bomb, as it's especially easy to make it immortal without perfect gear. So we then have ourselves Ancient Flame for that extra 50% attack speed, and then we can move on to gloves, where we have Storm Swell. Now that it's working, it is a huge amount of damage and too much to pass up. On your amulet, and specifically it needs to be on your amulet, is Frosty Strides. This adds an extra dimension of, well, everything to this build. It means our teleport evade, which we are of course spamming, will explode with frost, doing a load of damage amped by our various, well, amps, including the talents we have in our skills for cold damage. But it also means that we freeze everything, which again is even more damage amping, but make everything vulnerable permanently, and this is our infinite vulnerable engine, which lets us go really heavy into both critical strike damage 500% and vulnerable damage at 340, which is a lovely double dip. Also on our amulet means that we only need to be below 83% life, which is this, which is fine. Obviously not a factor if you are immortal, but if you're not, then only being at 83% is completely still comfortable, as that's barely missing any health anyway. In any case, then, I want to address this ring here. So, X-Files is not supposed to be in the build, okay? Don't put X-Files in it unless you have to. You actually want something like this. A normal ring with shredding blades on it for 30% more vulnerable damage, sending mine up to 604%, which is a huge damage increase. Massive. Way more than X-Files, which isn't really doing anything. Yes, we have permanent flame shield, so there is a technical permanent fire dot, but we don't have much lucky hit, and we're not going to proc it that much. X-Files is on currently over this with shredding blades, and the extra vulnerable damage it gives, and so on and so forth, and the extra tempers, which, look, this is just better in every way offensively. The issue is, as I'm sure you might have guessed by now, the cooldown reduction. I have a 12.06 second flame shield. With X-Files on, I have an 11.1. It's almost an extra second off, and that was just enough of a difference to make permanent flame shield happen. So you will have to test that yourself. But I cannot stress enough how much being able to have permanent flame shield while also having this normal ring on will make. Like, it's plus 5 tiers of pit level easily. So if the rest of your gear is perfect enough to let you have infinite flame shield without extra cooldown reduction on your second ring, then use this ring, a Shredding Blades ring. And to just give you a quick little demo of how close it is without my X-Files on, I will start going for it, and as you can see, my flame shield gets to about 2 seconds, and here we go with everything running. This should be a much better example, and it's about 1, you see, it is about exactly 1 second that I am missing to get permanent without having that extra bit of cooldown reduction. So, almost got it there, actually, did just about get it. It's very touch and go, you see how close it is. So if I was to get my legs, my chest, and my amulet to 12 out of 12 masterwork, I would have infinite flame shield with this ring on, and then everything would be perfect, and I could easily push to a pit 110 comfortably. So do keep that in mind. Alright then, I will leave this here as it is the true correct way to gear the build. Just use your X-Files if you need an extra bit of cooldown reduction crutch to make infinite flame shield work without perfect gear. Talking of the rest of the gear then, let's look unique. attacks. We want to have, of course, Tell Rashes for that lovely multiplicative stacking goodliness, and ideally you want to have Shaco, as it's just too good to pass up. The extra 0.4 to your flame shield, and everything else delicious it brings. I mean, yes, get yourself a Shaco. You can just use a normal helmet with cooldown reduction on, but you are missing out a lot comparatively. It's not required, but it is a huge gain. Then we have ourselves this, Flickerstep. This is what I have chiefly changed gearing-wise. Before, we used to have normal boots, like these, for evade cooldown reduction. But because I have managed to squeeze in so much more consistent, reliable attack speed, which lets us free up the boot slot to not need evade cooldown reduction. Because now, technically, yes, the evade starts at about 4.8 seconds, but our attack speed is so high that we actually can still teleport frequently enough, as you saw in the pit clearing, that we can squeeze in Flickerstep. What squeezing in Flickerstep chiefly does is mean that Unstable Currents is truly permanent. And I do mean that. And that is hugely helpful for multiple reasons. It means that we are perpetually throwing out lightning spears for stacks of Conjuration Mastery. It means we're just permanently throwing out extra damage in general, which is a nice increase to the build. It also means we permanently have that 25% attack speed, which means we have 25% more hectic procs, we have 25% more attack speed on Ice Blades for even more cooldown reduction, and it also means that Unstable Currents will come off cooldown while it's still active. And you might think that's not a benefit, that's a waste, but it is. Because with Unstable Currents active but off cooldown, it means it's no longer a target for Hectic, which means your Hectic is more likely to target your Flame Shield to make it even easier to be immortal. So this really adds just an extra little dimension that really pushed it over the top. Then we have our defensive aspects, or at least our regular armor. As I've said, Hectic, you need to have this somewhere, and legs is absolutely lovely to have it on, so whack that there. And then on your chest, if you're not playing fully immortal, then you want concentration. If you are playing fully immortal, then you want something like Dazing Strikes or Exploiters. So, let's talk affixes then, as this is quite the big one. You need to have cooldown reduction everywhere that it can be. Obviously, it's guaranteed on Shaco. If you have a normal helmet, cooldown reduction there. Cooldown reduction on your amulet. Cooldown reduction on your offhand, and then we are in a position to at least start approaching immortality. Past that, then, you want to have a critical strike chance, you want to have critical strike damage, you want to have vulnerable damage. You also want to have attack speed wherever possible, as we can get this build to about 250% attack speed, as yes, 100% isn't the true cap, there is multiple caps of attack speed from different pools, and technically you can get up to 100% each, and Affix attack speed doesn't compete with, for example, Ancient Flame. So we currently have on our attack speed 1.37 attacks a second, just sat here. When everything is firing, we reach about 2.8 attacks a second, which means a lovely Hectic activation every 2 seconds, which is huge. It also just means a hell of a lot of lightning spears and therefore Conjuration Mastery stacks, and a hell of a lot of cooldown reduction on our evade from attacking, which is what then lets us actually use Flickerstep instead of an evade cooldown reduction boot. So yeah, attack speed is very, very nice. Intelligence is always good past that. You don't need any max life anywhere if you are running this as Immortal Flame Shield, and then just general damage increases will do you well. Make sure then on your actual legs and chest you have ranks to Flame Shield on your chest, and ideally instead of Thorns here I would have ranks to Arc Lash just for a little bit of extra damage, but I've not managed to roll it. Other than that then, we are good to go, though special shout out to your neck, where instead of Critical Strike Chance here, I should have either Conjuration Mastery or Devouring Blaze ranks, but it's not a huge deal. Honestly, getting the Unicorn Amulet bit of cooldown reduction alongside a flame shield duration and evade cooldown reduction temper was plenty enough for me. So a quick look at stats then. As I've said, lots of critical strike damage, lots of vulnerable damage. You want at least 40% critical strike chance, as much attack speed as you can get. And then over on this side of things, we need to have at least 40% cooldown reduction. Ideally, what you're aiming for is the 45% mark. That's where it makes it comfortable to get infinite flame shield, as we can have 3 flame shield duration tempers across the build. So yeah, once you hit about 42-43% cooldown reduction without X-Files on, that's when you can use your normal ring, gain a load of damage, and improve the build even further. So let's look at tempering then. On one of your weapons, you want teleport damage and teleport nova size, very specifically. On the other, you want to have a chance to deal either poison or shadow damage for the extra stack of Tal Rashes, and then cold is okay-ish because at least it helps Frosty Strides, but ideally you want this to be just close damage. And then on your ring, you want said close damage, and technically instead of unstable currents, what you actually want is to get yourself Ice Blade's cooldown reduction, but there's not a huge amount in it. If unstable currents comes off cooldown earlier, then as I said, it benefits you because Hectic isn't targeting it, so whichever you happen to hit. On your necklace, very specifically, and this is going to be the brick bastard of the build, you need to get flame shield duration and evade cooldown reduction. Ideally in a high roll, but if you get both alongside cooldown reduction, then you are absolutely happy. On your legs, we need flame shield duration, and then ideally chance to freeze, but chance to stun is fine. On your gloves, you want ideally close damage. I bricked them on just pure damage, and then ideally chance to freeze. And then on your chest, you want flame shield duration, and then ideally chance to freeze, but I ended up bricking it on slow, so that's life. Masterworking wise, you just want to hit cooldown reduction, flame shield duration on everything that has it. Either or is absolutely fine. Other than that, just your good offensive stats are absolutely fine to hit. Piloting this then is fairly straightforward. You want to hold shift so that when you then R-clash, you don't move towards the target. So if I'm hovering over trading dummy here, I'm still not going towards it, whereas if I let go of shift, I will start walking towards it before R-clashing, which you don't want because it means you'll just be walking everywhere instead of swiping, and all we care about is just maximum swiping. So hold shift, and then we're good to go. Past that, spacebar teleport from your enchantment on cooldown. This is where your damage is, so when you're on top of an enemy, you're just spamming it on top of them forever. And then everything else, and I cannot stress this enough, is just use it on cooldown. You move through the dungeon like this, going from pack to pack, exploding everything up, freezing it with Frosty Strides, doing loads of damage. That's all well and good. Honestly, the R-Clash doesn't even need to hit the enemy. Obviously, it's extra damage, so do so, but mainly it's just the engine that powers it. But once you actually start fighting something, just press everything on cooldown as it comes off. There is no reason or rhyme, especially if you're doing infinite flame shield. Just press it as it comes off instantly, and then spam teleport on top of the enemy, and you can see just how fast the teleport is coming off cooldown. Hit all of your buttons all of the time, and you will have a great time. That leaves then Paragon, which is looking extra healthy because we've been able to save a load of points because we're running Immortal Flame Shield, and we also can just use full offensive glyphs. So for once, we don't get resilience as we don't need the life, and we don't need the all resist, so it saves 4 points there. Up right through Elementalist, and then over to the glyph where we find Charged. This is just a lovely permanent extra 15% multiplicative, the crackling energy summoned by the teleport. This works out really well. Activate it with the intelligence, we get Erudite just to activate it, and then up through Elemental Balance into Enchantment Master. Initially going left to this intelligence, keep going left, grab Elementalist as we go past it, as we might as well get the damage, and then up through Suffused Resilience all the way to Enchantment Master. 20% more Ice Blades, 20% less cooldown on your teleport. You need to have this. It makes a huge difference. Then we can go right from said intelligence, grab yourself Elemental Balance, and here we find find Elementalist, another 15% multiplicative. Head up to the Erudite to finish activating it, and then right into Burning Instinct, as we are used to seeing. Arranged again as we're used to seeing it, heading straight down, and this time we don't need to get Safeguard. Again, we're immortal, so we head down to Destruction into the Glyph slot, get yourself Cinders, and then we want to head down and grab the extra Dexterity from here. Technically, we didn't need the damage reduction, but we do need the Dexterity, so that's all well and good, and then we might as well grab a little bit of extra damage in Kindling because we have spare points. Then we want to head down here into the next board, which will be your Frigid Fate, arranged so that Guarded is in the top right, and then we want to head over here, grab yourself Oppressive, because we can now, a little bit of extra vulnerable damage, and then straight down to the Glyph, where we find Tactician, buffing up our vulnerable damage, and the extra 10% multiplicative. Get the Dex to activate it, and then straight right through Weakness to this Dex, looping round to grab the maxed out Frigid Fate, and then we continue on. Again, technically, we don't need to get this guarded, so you can save these 2 points if you need to and put them elsewhere. I'm really trying to hybrid a board that works for both nearly permanent Flame Shield and truly permanent Flame Shield, so on we go. But yes, if you have permanent Flame Shield, respend these 2 points anywhere else you want. Then we can continue on as we head into Ceaseless Conduit, arranged like this, so the Glyph is in the top left, and then we head straight to that Glyph, getting the Dex that we need to activate Exploit, and then pump it as much as we can. As I could do this, and then get the extra Dex here to have even more vulnerable damage, as an example of something you can do. But yes, get all of the Dex you can, and Exploit goes here. Then we want to exit in to Enchantment Master, and Elemental Summoner, even, and head straight up to the Glyph via this Intelligence, where we will activate Enchanter, hence my little confusion earlier. Then we want to get Erudite and Conjurer to finish activating it, going through Conjurer over to the right into our final board, which is our Static Surge. We want to keep going and get all of the Dex required to then activate Flame Feeder for an extra 10% multiplicative, letting us use a really good bunch of very offensively powerful glyphs. I've got Incapacitate because I just might as well, again, 3 points, and that's how it is. Now, technically speaking, there is an argument to be made for getting rid of Incapacitate, getting rid of Guarded. We could technically get rid of Kindling, we could get rid of Oppressive over here like this. Now we're back up to 15 points. We could get rid of a few of the bits of extra Dexterity that we don't actually need to activate Exploit here, and now we have an extra 19 points. You can almost get away with a extra glyph and take yourself to 8 glyphs, which would be kind of ridiculous, but there isn't actually an 8th glyph I'm desperate to have, so instead I decided to just spend the points in grabbing a few of the more potent nodes and pumping up some glyphs that do get a lot from being pumped up. But just so you are aware, as my reasoning there, technically you could squeeze an extra glyph. I think it would be close out of this board. But that said, I am very happy with this board in general, and I will leave it in your fine hands to fine-tune as you wish, but this has worked wonderfully for me. Which then brings us to an end. My new, improved, perfected teleport, frosty strides, bomb explosions, speed clearing beauty that I am so very happy and proud of, infused with infinite flame shield and just having an absolutely wonderful time. Season 4 really has been great, and I hope there is still more to it. I still hope for some addressing of Sorcerer's core problems, but for now, hey, at least we have this. Like if you enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.